The first thing I'd like to say is that money is actually worthless. And so that is a shocking statement for some, I'm sure, because most people spend so much time thinking about money, chasing after money. So we find ourselves in this situation where we constantly, every day, every Monday morning, we get up and we have to go and do something that we don't like doing. This is the ridiculous situation you've created there. You have to keep on doing something that you don't like doing, simply so that you can continue in the future doing something that you don't like doing. I like that idea for one of Newton's laws, that things will continue doing what they've been doing unless a force strong enough to change them acts upon them. Like, you need a force that's going to come and act upon your life. So you will, by its very nature, you will simply keep doing these things over and over again, even though you know they're not meaningful, you know you're wasting your time.
Hello, Seeker friends, and welcome back to the Acceptance of Life podcast. This is episode 9 already, How Time Flies. I have to say that even if our podcast would get 0 views, I'd still be doing it, because I get to have these wonderful spiritual conversations with my good friend Vajan every week, and I learn so much from them. This episode is about money. What is it? And more importantly, how does it change and influence the way we act in the world? So in this episode, we explore different spiritual perspectives on money, each of which can really transform and change your relationship with money. I'm sure that you will love the section where we dive into the difference between the scarcity mindset and the abundance mindset. It's one of my favorite parts of the episode anyway. We also talk about the difference between the life of desire and the life of aspiration. Why does desire have such a bad rap in spiritual teachings? And is there an alternative approach to life that does not leave us wanting, empty, or frustrated? Now, if you've listened to more episodes, then I'm sure you've seen and experienced what a genius storyteller Vajan is. I really feel lucky to have him as my friend. And also in this episode, he really does not disappoint. He tells some wonderful personal stories that really illustrate the ideas and the concepts that we talk about. So without any further ado, I give you episode 9. This is the money episode.
Wow, this is a big topic. I'm excited to find out what information we can glean about this topic that I think affects every single person on the planet almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting also to see how we can look at money from a spiritual perspective, from an earthly perspective. There's many perspectives on it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to start, if that's okay, with a quote from our teacher, Sri Chinmoy. And actually, I have 2 quotes about money, which are interesting because they kind of are for different target groups, let's say. So I'm going to start with the first one. There was a question. What is the proper attitude towards money and possessions for householders? And then Sri Chinmoy answers, householders must take money as material power, which has to be utilized divinely. Money power is not to be used to lord it over others, but to meet with the necessities of life. This power has to be used judiciously, devotedly, and in a fulfilling manner. Money has considerable power, but whether it is good or bad depends on the individual. The individual can use it divinely or undivinely. When money power is used properly, it is a divine boon. If it is misused, it is a veritable curse. So that's the first quote.
And so by householders, can you explain to us what a householder is in this particular
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, householder kind of is a term in the spiritual traditions that means people who have families and basically have the responsibility of raising a family and at the same time want to live a spiritual life. So they're combining let's say, the ordinary family life with a spiritually oriented life. Would you say that is the way to explain it?
I do concur.
Yeah, and then you have the seekers, the spiritual seekers, who very often can be living alone. And traditionally in the past, they would live in a monastery or in an ashram, and they are really, their focus is solely the spiritual life. And I guess you and me, in that respect, are seekers.
Yes, indeed.
So I have a quote also about the seekers, and this is the following. It's a short poem by Sri Chinmoy. The seekers can make very fast progress if they have already discovered the undeniable truth that money power is infinitely less significant than a speck of dust.
Wow. So
Yeah,
that is a very different approach for the two groups looking at the very
exactly.
same reality.
Yeah, that's why I found it interesting to contrast these two writings together, because they come from the same source. But yeah, how would you say, like, they seem to be for different groups, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's start at the very beginning and see if we can come from the start of by looking at actually what money is, and then start trying to understand the stories that we have around that. And then
Yes.
I think that will hopefully start to illumine us a little bit as to the nature of money and how it can be a curse or a blessing, or perhaps even just a speck of dust.
Very
So,
good. Sounds interesting.
so yeah, the first thing I'd like to say is that money is actually worthless. And so that is a shocking statement for some, I'm sure, because most people spend so much time thinking about money, chasing after money. A lot of the decisions they make are orientated towards increasing the amount of money that they have. But money in its inherent state is worthless, and it only becomes valuable because of the stories we tell about it. So if we found ourselves in a situation where civilization collapsed for some reason, at that point, if you did no longer have a functioning society, money, you can't eat it. It's not going to keep you very warm. You might be able to stuff it in your mattress, perhaps, to make yourself a little bit more comfortable, but it has no real inherent value to it. And it becomes valuable only when we have a functioning society which has an equal appreciation for the value of money as we do. So the value of money comes from the stories that we tell about it and the acceptance that a group of people have for that idea. So if a lot of people didn't accept the story of money, then money would be far less valuable. And so there's some things that are inherently valuable. So say, for example, food or fuel for heating or cooking, um, housing
Resources. Yes,
and clothing.
resources,
And so
objects.
all of these things that will actually help keep you alive here on Earth. But money is really not one of those things. So that's something good to start with. And then the other thing that's really interesting about money is that money is supernatural. And
Well,
so when I
what does
talk about,
that mean? What does
so
that mean?
when I say supernatural, I'm not meaning that it has some power to cast spells or some sort of occult abilities, but it means it comes from outside of the natural world. So you don't find money in the natural world. So it's supernatural. So the fact that we have had to created it, and brought it into being, it is not coming inherently from the natural world. So that makes
Yeah,
it
animals
supernatural.
don't use money. You don't see a donkey, buying his hay and giving.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're getting away without paying any rent or it's
Crazy.
an outrage. It really
Yeah,
is.
living for free, no taxes.
So, so I think those 2 points are really kind of an interesting place to start. So the fact that money itself has no worth, or it's worthless, we could say, and money is a supernatural thing. It's something we've created. It's a story that we've created. And so if we look at why we have money is basically to make the functioning of trade between people easier. So for the longest periods of time, since the very beginning of human civilization, we've traded goods between each other. So you may have lived near the coast, so you had a lot of access to seafood and shells and other things, but there might be particular sorts of rocks that you needed, which only come from inland and the mountains. And so at some point in the past, trading routes began. So people would come from one area to another and exchange things of value between them. So you may have a whole bunch of seafood and shellfish, and then you exchange them for a particular sort of rock or a particular sort of material that you have very little of. So that was really the beginning of trade. And so it was all the barter system. So I had something, you had something, and we would try to exchange. And so the problem with that is, like, even if we take it much further forward, if we're living in a village and you're the baker and you want to get a pig from the pig farmer, and trying to come up with a fair amount for the for the transaction is always more difficult. And so the idea with money is money came about for a few reasons. So first of all, money is really portable. So it's much easier to carry, some coins in your pocket than it is to carry 10,000 horseshoes that you've made with you.
So,
And also money is very easily divisible. So if I have a pig and I'm trying to trade you a pig for some horseshoes, you may not want a whole pig. You may just want a small portion of a pig. And so then what am I getting? I get left with, half a pig, for example, so, so money has some inherent value because it's portable, it's easily divisible, it's durable, and also it's widely accepted. And so that's really the time we're living in now. So if we use the US dollar for an example, you can be almost any place in the world, and if you need to buy something for someone or you need something from someone, there's a lot of people who believe in the value or the story of the US dollar. And it's the same for all of our currencies, the euro or the New Zealand dollar, all of these things. So there's a strong story behind it which gives it value, but it's been a long time since it actually had some value.
So what's the story here?
So I mean, the story, you've got to think back in the past when money started for us, like in the modern world, let's say. So in the ancient world, they were minting coins, which actually had some amount of precious and scarce metals in them. So the coin itself had the value embedded in it. And then at some point until I think it was probably about the 1930s, I think in America, the American dollar was on what's called the gold standard. So for every dollar that the American government was giving out, they claimed to hold a corresponding amount of gold to back that. So there was some physical value backing up the money that they were giving out. And so, I mean, really the story is the trust in the system.
Yeah.
So you never knew, like when the government started printing legal tender and when it was gold backed, you still didn't know if they had the amount of gold to print the amount of money they had. But now it's been completely uncoupled from that. So governments now all over the world print money like crazy. But because we trust the stability of the system in some way, which we have to be able to survive in the world, we say, okay, this dollar, which is a legal tender, printed by the Dutch government or, the European Union, we trust that, okay, this will have some value going forward. So we'll accept that as payment for our time and energy that we've put into some particular...
Yeah, I mean, in theory, you should still be able to go to the American bank with your dollar and get a little bit of gold for it.
Yeah,
right?
Unfortunately, that ended a long time ago, and so that's brought about some of the problems we have in the world now. But that's a topic more for our economics channel that we'll be launching.
We will be launching
next year, perhaps.
Yeah.
So we've got this idea that we've got money, and so money is really based on a story. So we have a story that this thing has value. So even though it has no inherent value, we believe that it has value. And so that's what's giving it its power.
Yeah, and so, the thing is that if everybody believes it, then it becomes true. Like
exactly.
that only works if everybody in the whole community, adheres to that kind of level of trust.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, it will collapse.
Yes, exactly.
And it has collapsed in the past. So if governments were unstable and if trust in the government or in the monetary system declined, then you saw these huge inflation rates skyrocketing.
And we still see that in some places around the world at the moment. So like Zimbabwe, for example, in recent times, really suffered from that. Venezuela. We still don't realize perhaps how precarious the whole system is because the system we're living in is so complicated. And
there was a time in Germany in 1922 and 23 in the Weimar Republic where the inflation rates were so high that people got their salaries in wheelbarrows. So the amount of Deutschmarks they had a few million, and it would every week it would decrease in money. So once you got your money, immediately you had to buy something because the next day it would be worth less. Yeah. So that amount of uncertainty, that's really harsh to live by.
Yeah, exactly. So we're very lucky in some ways that we have lived, in the last 40, 50 years has been really an unprecedented time of peace and prosperity for especially for the Western world. Yeah, we're very lucky that we haven't had to go through those types of experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got this idea that so we've got a little bit of a picture about what money is now, and so what I think we want to remember is that when we think about the world, we have the world of things, the things and people that make up the world, and the experiences that we have interacting with all those people and those things. So, you get up in the morning and you get on your bike and you bike to work, and there, you're actually on a physical vehicle, you're on a physical machine, you're on physical streets, you're interacting with other people. And and you get to work and you open the door and you go in and you start making waffles and you sell those waffles. And, you're dealing with reality. Like everything around you is real. And the people come in and, talk to them and they tell you what they would like. And then you exchange with them this real physical thing for a representation. So that's what we want to think of as money is coming from the symbolic world. So money is not real in the way that most of the things you're dealing with on the daily basis. Like, the waffles are real, the toppings are real, the floor is real, the stairs, like all of the things in your Waffle House are real. The only thing that's not really real there is the money. And the money is a representation of something that's real.
Yeah.
And so it's a representation of value. So that person did some work or created something or made something, and in exchange for them creating something in the real world, hopefully, they were, that has some value in the real world, they were given that money and then they give it to you. So it's an ability to pass on, transform work and energy and effort and creativity and prosperity and productivity into a form that you can give to someone else. So, so maybe they made websites. So they made 2 websites for someone and they gave them a bunch of money. And now they're transforming those websites they made for someone else into a waffle in the real world.
It's still trade. It's still trade.
Yeah. So that really interesting thing to really start to think about is, what stories do you have around money? Because money is a representation. And so when we think about our lives, and let's use my music store as an example. Yeah. So at the end of the year, when I look back over the year of experiences I've had in the music store, I think of all the things that happened, all the different customers that I had in, the beautiful interactions and relationships I created with people. And for example, on one day, a man came into my shop and we had a wonderful conversation, and he was wanting to buy a sitar for his friend and, someone really meaningful in his life. So he brought this sitar and he paid $2,000. And I've got this wonderful memory of this experience, and it was very real and tangible. And that gets recorded in my accounts as a sale of $2,000. And so when we're thinking about that representation of the world, the dollars and the trade that I did, that's a representation of a real activity that happened in the world. But the thing is, it is not the same as that real transaction that happened in the world. The real transaction was really rich and full and meaningful. And like the transaction, when it's written just in simple terms of money, becomes very meaningless. It becomes a very poor symbol or representation of the real world. So, all I see is plus $2,000 in my accounts. Mm. And so, and if we look at our life across time and we compare that to our bank balance, the bank balance is like a record of all of your activities that involve the exchange of value. So, you went here and you brought some bread, and you went here and you brought some groceries, and you went here and you bought some new shoes, and then you deposited some money that you earned through making waffles, and then you see a number at the end of the day. And so you really want to think, like, what is really real here? Is it the number of dollars in my bank account? Is it the fact that, I had this transaction, the money went up, this transaction, the money went down? It's all a very poor representation of something that's actually so incredibly rich and beautiful and meaningful. And so I think we really want to be very careful as to how we value our lives, because it seems when we simplify our lives into just these comings of goings of, dollars coming into your account and going out of your account and some balance left over at the end, is that really a good representation of the quality of your life and how your life is going? Like, if you really want to feel like, am I living a good life? Am I living a meaningful life? Is that going to come from this type of representation?
No, I would say it's not. At the same time, what happens in the bank account is not without its importance. Mm-hmm. As I have experienced myself over the last few weeks. Last week, I told you about the financial struggles that we're experiencing at the moment. And that bank balance becomes kind of an important issue. Like, if there's not enough there, you kind of get the stress feelings like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Are we going to survive? Are we going to make it? And that is quite real, I must say,
Yeah. So that's really interesting when you think about it like that this number, this series of numbers that are just a representation of the real world, if they tend in a certain sort of direction, it actually changes your mood and your experience of real reality, like of your
Exactly.
day-to-day life. It changes depending on how that number moves.
Yeah, it's
So,
really weird. There's been some research that I've read that
yeah,
up until if people earn, let's say people earn a certain number, but it turns out that up until you're earning $60,000 a year, your happiness will go up until that number. So the
yeah,
more money you make, the kind of better you feel about your life and about the freedom that you get with that. But it kind of plateaus at 60,000 euros dollars a year. So anything that you earn above that does not increase your feeling of well-being. But it's
yeah,
interesting that before that it does. So there's a certain let's say number that you feel you're still struggling to make ends meet, or you're living from paycheck to paycheck, and then it's actually great to make more money because you feel you have a little bit more security and you're freed from this sense of foreboding, this sense of, oh my god,
yeah,
which is kind of a fear connected to the, let's say, the lower chakras, right? There's this knowledge about the first chakra that is connecting us to security in life, and the fear connected with that is if you lose your livelihood, or you lose the things around you. And that's when people are in financial difficulties, I think that kind of fear starts to be generated in their life.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with all of those things, and everyone knows on some level it's very hard to be completely separated from the value and the story that we've created around money and your bank balance and how
Yes,
it's moving. But I still want it to be really clear that it is simply trying to be a representation of the real world. But because it's a very simplistic representation, it misses out nearly everything that's important in the real world. And so
100%.
I think that's a really key thing to note. So if we want to look at a really over the longest period of time, the quality of our life, I think there's a huge part comes from the intention in our actions, the intention that we put into our actions. And the problem with focusing overly on that number as a measure of success, there's a few things about this. And it's one of these things that humans, we love to try and simplify complex problems. So the world is so complicated and there's so much going on that we would just love if there was one thing that we could focus on that would tell us how we are going. That if we could focus on that and maximize that thing, it would solve all of our other problems. And so you see that a lot through other people around you and on the internet, especially these kind of like miracle cures. It's like, just take this one supplement, just do this one exercise and you'll lose all of your belly fat. Take this one supplement and it's gonna solve all of your energy problems. Or
Are you saying it doesn't work like that? Come on.
I think it's really dangerous to try and find a really simplistic solution to a very complicated problem.
Ah,
And
darn.
so the thing is, your life is a really complicated problem. And so the fact that you could think that by simply having a certain amount of dollars in the bank, that would solve the problems of your life, I think that is far too simplistic thinking. And the other thing that's really interesting that I want to touch on, there's this idea called the measurement problem. And what the measurement problem relates to is that as soon as you start making something a measure for something else, people will try and maximize that measure. So, for example, the world that I do a lot of work in and I'm interested in is sports and sports performance. And so over time, we keep finding these particular things that we can measure, and we think they're going to be the things that are going to allow us to predict someone's performance. And so for a long time, there was this idea that your VO2 max was incredibly important. So it was this, the VO2 max is how much oxygen you can take in per minute and utilize. So it's the amount of oxygen you can breathe in, send to your working muscles and use. And so when they discovered that they could measure this VO2 max, they thought this is going to be the thing that's going to tell us, we can test people and then we'll know exactly how fast they're going to be, in a particular discipline. And they thought this one thing is going to be the magic number. And so there was some correlation between it. So obviously some people who have really high VO2 maxes, it gives you a potential to perform at a really high level. But over time, you start to see that there's people who have very high VO2 max and they get defeated in a race by people with a much lower VO2 max. So it's not this clear correlation or causation that if you have a high VO2 max, you're always going to be a really top athlete. And then once people started measuring the VO2 max, people started doing workouts to try and maximize their own VO2 max levels. So people found that there was particular ways of training and focus that you could try and elevate your VO2 max. And if that's something that you're measuring and you're saying, oh, this is a really important number, people will find ways to try and hit that number.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, that number could have been quite a useful piece of information to help us know that if we're going the right direction or if someone's going to be good at something or not good at something. But as soon as people start to focus on that measure and start trying to improve that measure, it's no longer a really useful at telling you what you thought it was going to tell you. Because, if I did a whole bunch of workouts just focusing on my VO2 max, I'd probably, over time, my VO2 max might go up, but my performance as a runner might go down because I'm not doing all of the other types of training that you need to do.
So you're staring blindly at one number, thinking that's the cure-all.
Exactly.
And then there's other factors. Yeah, I think with the running, one important factor is that VO2 max may give you a good estimate of your potential. Yeah. So it's a number that delineates your potential, but then how do you reach your potential? So that's whole other game. Because some people can run themselves right to the ground and really maximize their potential, while others, cannot just get there. For some reason, they have the potential, but they don't know how to, their body will not allow them to get there. So I think there's a whole mental game connected to that, like how hard you want it and how much motivation do you have and those things.
Yeah. So let's put this measurement problem into the money game. So you've got this number that's, like a record of all your transactions, the money coming in, the money going out, and is it going up or is it going down? And so if you're only interested in maximizing that number, that becomes the measurement problem. That suddenly there's this one thing that you can measure in your life. So you can't measure very easily how much gratitude you have and how much love you have for the people around you and how kind you are or how empathetic. So there's so many of the areas of your life which are incredibly important for your well-being. You can't measure those. And the one thing that you can measure is the dollars in the bank. And so then the measurement problem becomes the idea that people will focus exclusively on this one thing that they can measure. And they think that, okay, if I get this to a certain number or if I get it over a certain threshold, then I can be happy. And this is what we've talked about a little bit earlier. But that does become a real tendency where the human mind wants to find simple solutions to the complex problems of the world. And the amount of money in your bank account becomes a very simple a very easy way for you to fall into that trap.
They have tried to quantify happiness. Have you heard about the gross national happiness in Bhutan?
Yeah, I know that they've been great proponents of this idea.
Yeah, so in Bhutan, they wanted to measure the happiness of their people, and they invented this measurement, the gross national happiness, instead of gross national product. I don't know how far they got with that, but it seems like a great idea. But I think it's hard to quantify things like happiness. But you're totally right. I agree with that. It's and the thing is that money is such a tempting measurement to go for because it does buy you, let's say, outer freedom. Yes. So if these numbers go up, you can basically do in the outer world whatever you want to. You can go on that holiday. You can take time off. Yeah, time is money, they say, right? So if you have enough money, it buys you time. Yeah. And then you can do with your life all these wonderful things. You can pursue all your desires or dreams. So that's why it's such a tempting measure, I think.
Yeah. And then what you said was really perfectly leads on to the next point that I wanted to touch on, and that's the idea of what do we actually want in life? What do we really want in life? And the problem for most of us is we don't really know what would actually make us truly happy. And so when we don't truly know for us what would actually be the most meaningful thing for us to do with our time, then falling back into this game of trying to collect more wealth becomes a very easy option. And like you said, if we had enough money or more money than we have, perhaps it would perhaps buy us some freedom to go and do the things that we think we would like to do. Yeah. And so the problem with this is often we're not very good at actually thinking about things in a complex way. So if we think, okay, I'm working really hard, what I would really like was just to be sitting on a beach and not have to do anything. And so we create this picture of this ideal experience that we think we would like. And so we think we would be lying on the beach and it would just be so blissful. And so the problem for us, like we've talked about in the past, that everything everything bad, we imagine it's going to be far worse than it actually is. And everything good, we imagine it's going to be far better than it actually is. And so when we actually finally get to, all winter we've been waiting to get to, the Canary Islands. And we finally arrive there at the Canary Islands and we think, oh, we're going to have such an amazing time here. And on the first day, we spend far too long in the sun. We get totally sunburned. And so then we spend the whole rest of the trip like bright red and our skin's sore and we feel uncomfortable and we feel awkward. And so reality is never as good as we imagine it's going to be.
Yeah.
And these types of, these fantasies that we create for ourselves. And it's the same in so many ways when we think, oh, if I just had a bit more money, then I could really, just take my time and do my art or, really dive into my hobbies and really enjoy them and, spend all this time doing, my lawn bowls or, playing golf or whatever it is.
You're not going to say that that's not going to work either, right? Come on.
Yeah, the problem is that when you get there, you're actually still the same person you were when you were unhappy doing your job every day. And so the fact that you were unhappy doing your job every day kind of gives me a clue that even if I put you in a different situation, you probably still haven't learned the secret of being happy in the moment, because the moment you're in is the same. You may be standing in a different position and you may have a different outfit on. And instead of, your laptop in front of you, you have your golf clubs in front of you. And that might be fun and enjoyable as a change for some period of time. Yeah. But at some point you run into the problems that you haven't changed. So the numbers in your bank account may have changed, but you're still the same person. And all of the weaknesses, all of the flaws, all of the things that were making you unhappy about yourself and the parts of you that were causing your unhappiness in the previous situations, you still haven't transformed any of those things. So it's a far too simplistic picture of what you need to make you happy.
What about if people have really boring jobs? So there's a lot of those jobs in the world, right? And it can be just, mind-numbing jobs where you're just behind a computer screen and you're moving numbers. So that can be great, right? If you can get out of that kind of job and do something more meaningful instead. I mean, I can imagine that increases your level of happiness and satisfaction.
Yeah. And so that's when we look at it that way, we're actually looking at a different type of problem and trying to solve a different type of problem. So we're trying to, that's a much deeper level of analysis, because suddenly you realize, okay, the things I'm doing are not providing me any meaning or satisfaction. And so then it's like, okay, what activities could I undertake that perhaps would actually make my life feel meaning? And the interesting thing is that there's kind of two ways to look at the world, and we've kind of touched on that. We've touched on the idea of success versus progress, and we could also tie that in with another idea, which is the desire life versus the aspiration life.
Ooh, I like that.
So they're two similar things. Success versus progress is similar in some ways to the desire life versus the aspiration life. But what we mean by the desire life is living in a way where you're trying to possess the world. You're trying to feed the desires that exist within you, and that you hope in some way that over time, if you feed them enough, then they will be satisfied, and then you can really enjoy your life. So the problem with this...
Well, there's the famous, I mean, if you look at it from a spiritual point of view, desire is always viewed as the cause of suffering. So one of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths was that life is suffering, first noble truth, and the cause of suffering is desire.
Yes.
So he said desire is the cause of all suffering. And that's, for many people, that's a tough one. They say, but how can I not, can I not fulfill my desires? Like, life would be totally boring without desires. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. So I've got this great analogy for the desire life. And the desire life is like keeping a pet crocodile in your room with you. And so when you start with the crocodile,
a pet crocodile, you say, a pet crocodile.
Just a little crocodile. You've got this little friendly crocodile, and he seems...
the guys all have in New Zealand, right?
Yeah, it's a common pet.
That you get on your birthday.
It's when you start with playing the game of the desire life, you've got this little crocodile, and you only need to feed it a little bit for it to be satisfied. And it's kind of cute. It seems kind of harmless. It's so small. What could it ever do to you? You're much bigger than this little crocodile. And you start feeding it just these small little crumbs. And it just gobbles them up. And you think, I'm in control of this. I'm in control of my desires. And unfortunately, over time, the crocodile's hunger increases. His desire for more and more starts to build and build. And so you start to have to feed him more and more to satisfy him. And so you see that for anyone who gets caught in that sort of spiral of addiction, that to start with, it's just one drink. And then, very soon it's 2 drinks, and then 4 drinks and 10 drinks. And, then things spiral very quickly out of control. And so this is the nature of that crocodile, that it grows very quickly. And so the crocodile, at the start, you think that you're in control of it. And at some point, though, you look inside your room and you realize there's a fully grown crocodile in there, and it's ravenously hungry. And then you start to think, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah. So you guys in New Zealand then move out, right? That's the time
when find a different house to live in.
Yeah.
But this is actually interesting. I actually just want to talk about this briefly. So I've got a lovely story about this. And so
okay.
2 years ago, me and 2 of my spiritual brothers went to Egypt. So I told you a little story about going to Egypt. That was an earlier trip. This was my second time to Egypt. And this time I really wanted to take a couple of my spiritual brothers with me. And we were going to travel down the Nile from Luxor all the way down to Aswan, near the southern border of Egypt. And down in the very deep south of Egypt are these people called the Nubian people. And they're the people who the indigenous people of the Nubian desert. And so they're not Egyptian people. They live in Egypt now, but they're not Egyptian people per se. So the Egyptian people are a real mixture of Arabs and, the Greeks were there, the Romans were there. So there's a real mixture of different ethnicities coming together to make the Egyptians. The Nubian people have very strongly kept their culture alive down in the far south. And so they originally lived in the Nubian desert. And so the Egyptians built this massive dam on the Nile River called the Aswan High Dam. And it's this most amazing feat of engineering, because for countless centuries, like the ancient pharaohs, their dream was to tame the Nile. Because every year in the rainy season, the Nile would go totally wild and just destroy everything in its path. So the river would move from side to side, it would enlarge, it would just, swallow up villages and houses and just be incredibly destructive. So there was this ancient dream of trying to tame the Nile. So I think it was sometime in the 1900s, the Egyptians finally finished this dam called Aswan High Dam. And so this allowed them to control the flow of the Nile. So, in the rainy season, they created a big lake behind it. And a lot of people don't know about Egypt, but one of the great, let's not say tragedies, but one of the things about living in Egypt for thousands of years, the most dangerous thing about Egypt was the Nile crocodiles. So the Nile crocodiles were unbelievably ferocious. And so you're living in the Sahara Desert, and you're there in the middle of summer. We were there in summertime. It was 45 degrees with a really hot south wind blowing. So you go outside and it's just wildly hot. It felt like a hairdryer being blown on you. And then you've got this amazing, huge body of water flowing past, and it's deep and it's beautiful, it's clear, and it's really cold. And for thousands and thousands of years, the poor people who lived in this region, like especially these, say, the Nubian people, for thousands of years, every time you went near the Nile River, you were afraid, because countless of your ancestors had been dragged in and chomped to pieces by these massive crocodiles. And so when they built the high dam, they took this opportunity to take all of the crocodiles and put them on the southern side of the dam, so the side away from Egypt. So now there's this giant lake there, and in that lake, there's about 30,000 of these giant crocodiles.
Whoa!
In the Nile River itself, there's none. So now, for the last, 60, 70, 80 years, you can go swimming in the Nile, and it's so amazing. It's like so beautiful and refreshing. But like when I was standing on the edge looking at it, I was just thinking, oh, these people have lived here for countless centuries, were constantly dealing with the problem of being incredibly hot, but then being incredibly fearful of the water because it was the home of those crocodiles. And so when they built this big dam, they made a huge lake there, and there was a village of Nubian people, and their village was going to get destroyed by the lake rising. So they actually moved these people, and they built them a new village. It's called the Nubian village, and it's on the other side of the Nile River from the town of Aswan. And so Aswan is like the most southernmost town in Egypt. And it kind of looks kind of like a relatively modernish Egyptian town. So it's a little bit wild and chaotic. And so I suggested to my friends that we could stay with the Nubian people over in the Nubian village on the other side. And so it's really colorful. And so these people are really interesting people, got a wonderfully rich culture and do this most amazingly beautiful paintings on the outside of their houses. So every year they repaint the house and draw these beautiful geometric patterns and colors and pictures. And so it's a wildly beautiful and interesting place. That I'd heard the story about the Nubian people. Because of their ancient relationship with the crocodile and it being so traumatic and difficult, I heard that one of the great pastimes for Nubian men in particular was to, at some point in their life, to capture a baby crocodile and keep it in their house. And so we were my good friend from Berlin, Shamalia, and I, we were going for a run through this village and we were having a really nice time. And as we're coming back to our accommodation, there was this really strikingly beautiful house. It's just beautiful. It was white, but there's amazing pictures and patterns painted on the outside. And so Shamalia and I were taking photos outside of the house. And then the Nubian gentleman whose house it was invited us in. He saw us appreciating his house and he so kindly, welcomed us in. And we came into a courtyard and we started talking with him. And he said to me, I have something very special in my house. Would you like to see it? And I said, oh, yes, I would like to see what you have, the special thing in your house. And I immediately had the sense that I was going to see something really interesting. So we went into the back room of his house. And there he had this big concrete tank. And it had wire mesh over the top of it. And as I walked close and looked in, there's this huge Nile crocodile in this concrete enclosure inside his house. And he said, I caught this when I was, a younger man. I caught it from a child, a baby. And he's been feeding it and living with it for all of these years. And so I've told a lot of people about this because I thought it was so wildly interesting to find someone who was living inside his house with the thing that is most fearsome in his world, like the thing that has killed his ancestors, that has terrorized his people for thousands of years. And here he is living with it inside his house. And a lot of Western people think, oh, that's so cruel. It's like, so cruel and mean to the crocodile. But I would posit you don't understand the mindset and the experience and the background and the history of these people. These people were terrorized by this creature for the longest period of time. So it goes so deep and it's such an ancestral fear of the crocodile. And so when there's something that you're really afraid of, the best thing you can do to become less afraid of that thing is what we now call exposure therapy. So exposing yourself to the thing that you're most fearful of. And so actually living with a crocodile in your house and feeding it and becoming accustomed to it in some way removes some of that fear, because some of that fear is the fear of the unknown. And so for this man, he had spent, many years living with this crocodile. So he was still practicing this way of life of exposing himself to the thing that is most fearful for them. And that was giving him the ability to face up to it with strength and courage. So there is a good way of having a crocodile in your room, but I think the desired crocodile, if you have him, you need to keep him in a small cage so he doesn't get too big.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah. About desire. I mean, another way to look at desire, the desire life, is like this famous picture of a man sitting atop of a donkey, and he's dangling a carrot from a rod in front of the donkey's nose. And so the donkey just sees the carrot and starts to run after it, right? But no matter how far it runs, it never quite grasps the carrot. And this is the promise of the desire life, right? The desire life says, okay, if you fulfill this desire, you'll be happy. You'll be fulfilled. If you get this beautiful house, if you go to this wonderful travel experience, if you find this partner, then your life will be fulfilled. And it's like the carrot. So we don't realize we're always running after happiness, but never really quite grasping it. And I think that's how the desire life ultimately betrays us. Yeah, because exactly. It's not providing anything that really sustains and fulfills us on the deepest level, on the level of our soul and of our true inner nature. And so that's, I think, where the aspiration life comes in. We talked about aspiration. So maybe good to define what is aspiration. Yeah. So for me, aspiration is the inner hunger for truth, light, peace, all those inner intangible qualities that you cannot touch, smell, see, or grasp with the five senses, but that are unmistakably real. And when you practice the spiritual life, when you practice meditation, spiritual disciplines, you become aware of these qualities and they become actually real and tangible. And the hunger for that is something that we are born with. So I think at some point in your life, you start to develop this yearning, this longing for the divine life, the life of peace, the life of inner joy. And that is the inner hunger I would describe as aspiration. And that's the perfect antidote against the eventual disappointments of the desire life, right?
Yeah.
So when you aspire, when you meditate, you gain these qualities and they do fulfill you on a very deep level. So if you have peace, if you have joy, if you have true unconditional love, those are fulfillment in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, beautifully put. Yeah. So I think that does a good job of giving us an idea and capturing a little bit of the essence of the aspiration life versus the desire life. Because I think it's such an important thing for people to really understand, because it's easy for us to say, well, if you keep chasing after your desires, they're never really truly going to fulfill you. But people often don't feel that. That's not how they feel about life. They're like, no, if I just get this car, if I just get this thing, then I can really be happy. So I think we want to just think about what we're aiming for there, and just in a couple of different ways, just so we can make it a little bit clearer for people. And so a good way, I really like this idea because I think it's really important, and I think it captures something that people really do realize, but they don't want to admit to themselves. And that there's often this situation where we find ourselves in, where we feel as though we have to keep on doing something that we don't like doing. So we have a particular sort of a job and we've got ourselves trapped in it in some way because we've got a lot of costs and expenses. We've got a lot of responsibilities, perhaps. So we find ourselves in this situation where we constantly, every day, every Monday morning, we get up and we have to go and do something that we don't like doing. And so the problem with this is the ridiculous situation you've created there. You have to keep on doing something that you don't like doing, simply so that you can continue in the future doing something that you don't like doing. So that is the...
Okay. If I may interject, I would say that in defense of these poor people, they would say, no, when I'm done with my job at 5 p.m., that's when my real life starts. Then I can relax, I can enjoy myself, I can do my hobbies, I can meet with friends. So I'm doing it for the free time, for the weekends, the holidays, and the evenings.
But it seems like a huge amount of time to sacrifice of your valuable life. Because the thing you want to realize is what is like, let's say I'm talking from myself, my own personal position here at this moment. But I think time is so incredibly valuable. Like each moment of my life for me is so incredibly valuable that I don't want to waste it. So I don't want to, let's not say waste, but I don't want to spend my time doing things that I know that I don't need to or I don't want to be doing. And a lot of people, they find themselves in that trap where they're constantly spending all this time doing things they don't want to be doing, just simply so they the next week continue again doing the things that they don't like doing. And it seems like the wise thing to do at that point is to make an intervention in some way. So, because the thing is, I like that idea for one of Newton's laws, that things will continue doing what they've been doing unless a force strong enough to change them acts upon them. Like you need a force that's going to come and act upon your life. So you will, by its very nature, you will simply keep doing these things over and over again, even though you know they're not meaningful. You know you're wasting your time. You know that they make you unhappy and they take away your joy in life. And the problem is as well is that if you think you can do something that you don't like, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week for many, many years and it not bleed out into the rest of your life, you think, oh, well, I'll go home and I'll enjoy my life then.
Yeah.
Will you really go home and enjoy your life then? Or will you go home and make everyone else's life miserable?
Yeah. Yeah, true.
And so I think that's when you start to awaken to, once you start to really watch yourself and pay attention to yourself. And that's when we go back to having some sort of...
I think also that's the reason why some people value crisis so much, because that is a force, like you say, that changes the course of their life.
Yeah.
And at that moment, you don't have a choice. You have to change your life. And then very often this change of direction turns out to be fruitful for them. So they kind of like, they better their life in some way. And it needed this crisis. It can be a disease or an accident, or you're fired from your job. And it seems horrible in the moment. But then over the longer term, people say, wow, they look back and they say, wow, this was actually a great thing that happened to me because it,
Yeah.
it gave me the opportunity to change my life. So never waste a good crisis, as they say.
Yes, exactly. That I like that saying. But yeah, so I would say though that you always have the opportunity to start writing a different story. So your life is created in the moment. And so as you start your own journey of awareness, so it's to really become present to the moment and to do your spiritual practices and become more aware, that is actually an incredibly powerful force that can act upon your life and move you in new directions. Because very often you could say, oh, well, I'm too tired from doing the thing that I don't like doing, so I can continue then the next week doing again the thing I don't like doing. It's like, well, if I start my spiritual practice, if I start every day doing a practice, you're going to start creating an energy and a momentum in your life that you can actually use to push yourself and change your direction, your trajectory through the world. So that's another benefit of having a spiritual practice that is going to actually help move you and towards something that's more valuable.
And so how does money tie into this idea?
So, well, I mean, because we're often trapped by the idea of money. Like we have to, it's that idea of money that is keeping us trapped in that particular position. And so, like, there's always different ways of looking at those things, though. And like, you can always, while you're doing one thing, start preparing to do something else as well.
So that's what I wanted to ask you, because you're not a very, very rich person. Let's say you're not a millionaire. You have you have a shop, you have your own business.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you do. I mean, if you look at your life, you would say this guy must be a multimillionaire because he's traveling the world. He's going to all these places: Egypt, India, the US, Europe every year. I think 6 months out of the year sometimes.
Yeah.
And when you look at your life, you're like, this guy must make so much money. He's flying, he's doing this and that, but you're not. And so this is, for me, it's a total miracle, but you do seem to pull it off. So what's the secret there? Because you do need to spend the dollars on all those flights and hotels and all those places that you stay. So tell us, reveal to us, what is the secret here?
Yeah. So okay, let's look at it from because we need to have the whole picture of what I think I'm doing.
Okay, so you have to finish
what I think I'm doing. Like, if we go back to what we've talked about in previous episodes, like we've got to decide: do I live in a friendly universe or a hostile universe? And like, you've got to make that choice at some point. And a lot of people unconsciously have chosen their actions are showing that they're living in a hostile universe. So they're always worried about scarcity. They're always worried that they're going to run out of things. And so this is what I call like the abundance versus the scarcity mindset. So if you've chosen to believe that you live in a hostile universe, you will naturally fall into a scarcity mindset because you'll believe that the universe is out to get you. The only way you can protect yourself is to gather together whatever scarce resources you can get your hands on and try and hold on to those things as tightly as possible. And so the outcome of that sort of thinking is that you become selfish, you become very possessive of things, you become
miserly, greedy.
Yeah, you become greedy and you hold on to things too tightly in the world. And I think one thing that I've really understood is, and seeing people who have chosen, like me, to believe that they live in a friendly universe that has my best interests at heart and wants to see me flourish and wants to see me learn and grow. If you take that sort of mindset, often you have this abundant sort of mindset. And so some of the wealthiest people I know have this amazing mindset of that there's an abundance of possessions, there's an abundance of material goods in the world, and that they see it as only normal and natural that many of these things will flow into their lives. And because they have that feeling that there's not a scarce amount of things in their life, there's an abundance of things, they're always willing to give and give and give. And so, and I love being around people like that, and everyone does. Like, if you find yourself in the presence of someone who lives this abundant mindset, it's really fun to be around because they're not quibbling over, who paid, the extra $2 for parking. And, for them, like, there's always going to be enough. And so they live in a way that is very free and very giving to the world. They're always willing to give what they have.
So again, I have to play devil's advocate here. So these people naturally have a good income, okay, to start with. So that's why they are able to be generous. They have enough money. But what about somebody who does not make a lot of money? And this person says, okay, I want to live in the abundance universe too. I want to live in the abundance mindset. Yeah. I'm going to spend, hundreds of dollars treating my friends to dinner every week. And that doesn't seem to work. Come on.
So we need to start taking actions as a vote towards that sort of universe. So if I only have $20 of spending money a week, and that's after I paid all my bills, I've got this $20, and I just hold on to it. And everyone knows that I'm never going to shout anyone else a drink or share anything with anyone else. And if there's a piece of cake, I'll make sure it's cut exactly down the middle so I get my share. That's not living as though we live in an abundant universe. But if I take my $20 and with that small amount that I have, I'm always willing to give and share with others. That's a vote towards, that's an action that's saying, hey, I really do believe I live in an abundant universe. And so we're actually starting to put something on the table, and it's according to our capacity. And so,
so it's starting with small actions,
exactly. It's starting with small actions, but actions that say that, to my capacity, I'm willing to give what I have. And so then you start to attract more into your life. Like as you give, you also start to receive. When you don't give, you also don't receive. It's like when you hold on to things really tight, you're blocking the flow of energy in the universe, because the universe is things are constantly moving and transforming. And so you can never really stay in the same place. So if you've got your $100 and you're just holding on to it for dear life, you're actually causing friction within the universe, because the universe is constantly transformative, and you're trying to sort of stay where you are and hold on to the little that you have, from a place of fear. And then you're going against the nature of reality. And so
because
then
it's like you're telling reality there's not enough of things. And so reality will tell you exactly, if that's what you believe, then that's your experience.
Yeah.
So if you say to the universe, there's never going to be enough, I never have enough, the universe will say, okay, if that's what you believe, here's your experience. You will never have enough. And so you create by your mindset, you create your universe, you create your reality.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a spiritual law. That's an eternal law, right?
Yeah, exactly. And because this actually is quite interesting, because it actually leads us to another thing, that sometimes becoming really wealthy is actually causes more problems in your life as well. So let's say the goal is to find the middle way, the middle path, where you have enough that you can do the things that are most meaningful to you, but you don't have too much that the wealth takes over your life. Because the thing is, money does not exist uncared for. So what I mean by that is you constantly need to be tending the money you have, because money is constantly losing its value. So, like, for example, during COVID, I heard recently that the European Union printed $6 trillion, which is $6,000 billion, and injected it into the economy. And so
I'm feeling that every day, because everything became so much more expensive because of that.
Exactly. And so we see it in one way, that things have become more expensive, but there's actually another way to look at it. And that is that your money has been devalued. Because as soon as there's more of something, as soon as the scarcity lessens and there becomes an abundance of anything, that thing becomes less valuable. So because the EU put that $6 trillion into the economy, all of your euros have less value. You can buy less for each euro. And so that's really what's happened, is that it looks like prices have gone up, but in fact, what's happened is that your buying power per dollar or per euro has decreased. And so if you have a whole lot of money, it's constantly losing its value. So it's actually a full-time commitment and job, if you've got a lot of money, to tend to it, to fight against this loss of value. So you need to be looking at where have I invested it? What's the best place to put it? How do I protect it from the loss of value? So having a lot of wealth actually becomes a problem. And it's like that great song says, "Mo money, mo problems." So
who sang that? Was that Bob Marley?
Okay. I don't know, but I thought I must put that in there somewhere.
I have a great Bob Marley quote actually about money.
Do you? Yeah,
I do, if I can find it. Go ahead.
So what else I can say about having a lot of wealth is, once you have a lot of wealth, you often find yourself falling into this position where you suddenly think you become very self-sufficient. So say in the beginning of your journey, you put some trust in God and the universe to look after you. And so that's the position I'm trying to keep myself in, that I have to keep constantly having faith in the universe that it's going to provide for me. And I have to keep taking actions as though I believe that it will provide for me. So I have to keep taking the step of booking a flight, of arranging with someone that I'm going to be there on a certain day. And so I'm taking the steps. And say I don't have all of the money at the moment, I don't know where it's coming from, but I trust that I leave a space in my life that it will flow into my life, that the money that I need will flow in to make the things
How
that I'm
will it
doing
flow
possible.
in? You need some kind of activity to keep it
Yeah,
flowing.
exactly. And
You're out
so
of nowhere.
so I have my coaching clients, and like say if I really felt as though I needed more money, perhaps some more athletes would come to me and need coaching. And if I
Yes. So
really needed some
you
more
do
money,
coaching on the
perhaps
side. It's kind
yeah,
of a second income stream for you, the coaching
yeah.
that you do. Yeah.
And also in my shop, like if so this is a really good story that kind of illustrates it for me. So in the early days of my shop, I was still a scarcity mindset man. I thought I lived in this world of scarce resources. And
You were once a scarcity mindset man? Oh
I
my
was
God.
only the scarcity mindset
You're,
guy. This was like,
you're
I was
not
like, okay,
amazing.
we've got like this limited amount of money in the store. And so I have to be really canny businessman. Like that was my whole thing. I was like, this is a great responsibility to look after this, manage and own this store. So I need to take it really seriously. And so, I was like looking at my cash flow and, I was trying to plan and be really strategic, and I'd set goals of, how much we needed to earn per week. And, like I was trying to be a proper businessman. And so in the first few years, cash flow is always a problem. And I'm importing instruments from overseas. And so I'd often have large bills due with either tax or with, paying my suppliers or paying the shipping companies. And so I was in a situation where by the end of the week, I needed to have $2,000 in the bank to pay a whole bunch of bills. And so from the first day of the week, I was like, sell. Like I was really like, I have to sell. I have to sell things to people. And so people would come in and I would be trying to pull money out of them. I'm like, buy something. And this problem with this mindset is people feel it. It's like if you go into a shop and there's a shop attendant and they're just like badgering you, they're just like following you around, like trying to like squeeze the money out of you. You really feel off put and you're really like, okay, I don't enjoy this experience. And so the first few days of the week, I was in this mindset, like every person was like, okay, I need to try and sell something to them. And as the week went on, I was just having no luck and I was having no joy as well. It's like so painful. It's like, oh God, I'm like really bothering these poor people who've come into my store and I'm like harassing them to try and make them buy something. And so we got to Thursday and I just surrendered. I was like, God, like, okay, like I perhaps will have to default on all these payments because I just don't have the money and I don't see it coming. Like the sales have not been good this week. Nothing's been working. So the Friday of the week, I just took to the position that, okay, whoever comes in, I'm just going to be of service to them. I'm just going to simply be present and to be of service and to try and just be there for them in whichever way possibly that I can. And so the day's going on and I've really given up now. It's like 4:30 in the afternoon. We close at 5. And basically our last customer of the day walks in, a gentleman I've never seen before. And I've also never seen him again. He walks into our shop, looks around, and then he points at a gong. He says, I like the look of that. Yeah, I'll take that. And oh my God, like, this is amazing. He's going to take this. And then he looks around, he sees a balafon, which is a big African xylophone with gourds underneath it. He says, that looks really cool. I'll take that as well. And one other thing over here, yeah, I'll take that, a string instrument. And I'm kind of looking like incredulous. I'm like, okay, well, do you want me to demonstrate these instruments? Should we play them? He said, no, they look fine. No, I'm very happy with them. He said, I'll take all 3 of them. And so I add them together and they equaled $2,000.
Oh,
so
no.
Suddenly, at the last possible moment, this man comes in through no effort of my own, not through my brilliant business planning or my amazing sales work. He just comes in and he provided exactly what I needed. And so when he left, I was sitting there and I was just so stunned. I was like, I thought I lived in one type of universe, but I actually think I was wrong about that. I actually think I've got my picture of the universe wrong. And from that point onwards, I chose to believe that the universe was a friendly universe and the universe wanted me to succeed and was on my side. And so since I took that position, there has always been enough. There's always been enough for me to do the right things. And then that's the thing as well, like when your aim is wrong and you're aiming for the wrong things, I think like even if you're doing it with the right intentions, you'll perhaps not have enough to do what you think you should do, because what you think you should do is the wrong thing for you. But I think if you get yourself lined up where your intentions are correct, your aim is correct, the universe wants to see you thrive. It wants to see you flourish.
So here I think we come absolutely at the essence of what money is. And I think you just nailed it. Money is the capacity to lead the life that you really want to lead from the bottom of your being. And so if that life is, in our case, it's a spiritual life. So for us, we do need to travel. We have these retreats worldwide. We go and see each other 2 or 3 times a year in these other countries. For me, that is a necessity. I have to do that. It's like I know that like you, I never worried about money. And I always felt money is just an instrument, a tool to get me to live the life, the richest possible life that I can live. And I think if you take money in that way, that's the proper way to look at it.
Yeah. I think that's really great. That really captures it. And so what I was saying a little bit there was, when we go too far into the chasing after the wealth, and then it becomes more problematic again. So there's that sweet spot we're looking for where we've got enough, we're comfortable we are able to do the things that are most meaningful for us. But if we keep chasing after more and more wealth and thinking that that's going to make us happier and happier, there's really the diminishing returns really kick in. And for me, I could feel that, like, if I'm really living my best possible spiritual life and doing the things that are most meaningful to me, and I lose track of that and I start chasing after more money, and even if I end up with more wealth, I will have lost something from that, because at the moment I'm living my life in a way where it requires me to have real faith in the universe.
Yeah.
It really requires me to have faith in the divine, that the divine is looking after me and giving me the experiences that are right for me.
And you totally lose that if you have too much wealth. Then you don't need that.
If you become really wealthy, you think, oh, well, look, I did this. I've got all this money. Like, I can do what I want. And you start to lose track of that feeling of what you may be able to do what you want, but you perhaps forget what you should do, the things that you should be spending your time doing. And so I think the universe is really well calibrated, that if we get ourselves in the right position, the universe will provide the right amount for us to be happy and to do those things that make our lives beautiful and meaningful. So
yeah, I once had a seeker in one of my classes, meditation classes, and he told me how one of his jobs was to take care of really wealthy people. And so I think he would be in Switzerland in the winter, like in St. Moritz, and he was the chauffeur, the driver of this family that was super wealthy. And, they were going on these skiing holidays, and he would have to drive them to different places. And he said these were the most wealthy, but at the same time, the most miserable people he ever met. Mm. And so he said everything in their life, they were constantly complaining, and, nothing was ever up to their expectations. And they were constantly, very, very negative and miserable. And he would take the wife shopping, and she would buy these dresses for $20,000-$30,000 and then would leave and even forget the dress. So he would go back and pick it up for her. It was like, and they were so miserable all the time. And it's like, wow, if you have too much wealth, it actually creates misery, I think. It really does. It's like the balance is shifted. You're meant to have this much or maybe this much, but then if it's too much, it's like, it's a burden that just pushes you down.
Yeah. And it takes me back to that idea that I've talked about previously, which is we need to love people and use things, not use people and love things. And wealth tends to be one of those things that pushes us towards that position of loving things and using people. And so
I love that.
And so actually, there's something really good that we could talk about around that, and that's that our belief or our aim creates the universe we live in some way. And so when you get caught up in this game of wealth accumulation, you find yourself in the position where that's the reality you start to live out, where you start to love things. So you fantasize about these things that you would like to own, like this amazing car, this amazing house, these amazing clothes, this jewelry. And then you see everyone in the world. You no longer see them as an individual or someone to be loved or connect with. You see them as opportunities to be used to help move you towards the things that you want. And so it skews your whole perception of reality. And so that's one of the real dangers, I think, as well, about having this mindset of trying to accumulate too much, is that whole balance gets lost. Because one of the greatest treasures that you have in your life is the ability to love and share love with the people around you. And love is one of those things it's not like wealth, where as we lose it, as we give it away, we have less of it. It's, it's not like financial power. It's a different sort of power where the more of it we give, the more of it we have. So it's one of those things that if you get obsessed and have your aim in the world wrong and focusing in the wrong way, you will undervalue what you have in each present moment. So the opportunity to love and be loved, to be connected with others, to share moments with people, because your goal is somewhere else. Your goal is always somewhere outside of where you are. So
Beautiful.
that's a real danger, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I read about Sri Chinmoy's words about money, he very often talked about money power is heart power, or heart power is money power. And he said that if you have true happiness, actually this happiness creates money. It creates a possibility for money to flow to you.
Yeah.
So a positive mindset, a joyful mindset actually creates money from a spiritual point of view.
Yeah. So he also said something really interesting, that talking about the desire life, we want to possess the world, but before we realize it, the world has already possessed us. And so that's really what we're talking about here, that I think that I want to possess all of these things in the world, this car, this house, all of these things, but I don't realize that they're actually possessing me. They've taken over. And so there's a couple of really good little analogies around that. And so one of them, one point to note that's really important is there's a real limit to physical, like material goods, how much you can actually ever possibly enjoy them. So what I mean is you can only ever be at one beautiful restaurant at a time, eating one beautiful meal. You can't eat 10 amazing meals at a restaurant. And you can't be at all these different places at the same time. If you've got all these beautiful houses, you can still only live at one of those houses at any particular time. You can only ever wear one outfit of clothing. So you may have this wardrobe full of thousands and thousands of dollars of amazing clothing. You can still only put on one of those outfits at a time. So there really is a true limit to how much you can actually enjoy the wealth that you have. So it seems like getting that balance right, where you have enough to do as you please and what would really deeply please you, but not so much that it takes over your life. And then this is another story that I like to tell to people. This one's a really good one that captures that idea about you being possessed by the world. And so this story is set in ancient feudal Japan. And so the main highway in Japan at that point ran from the two ancient capitals, the two most important cities, so Kyoto to Edo, which is now Tokyo. And so there was this, I think they called it a post road. So it had all these little townships and villages on the way, but it was the main route that people would travel in ancient Japan between these two important cities. And so there was an old farmer who lived on that road. And so he would see a lot of important people passing back and forth throughout the day, and he would be doing his thing and farming. And late one evening, he saw a courtier from the royal court galloping along on his horse at top speed, heading towards Kyoto. And so as the young man, important looking man on his horse galloping along, seemingly going somewhere really important, he shouted out to the young man, young man, can you tell me, what are you doing? Where are you going? And the young man, as he's flying along on the horse at top speed, he leans back and shouts out, I don't know, ask the horse. And this is very much the story of what many people are doing. You've been captured by something that is not really you. It's some desire for something or another. And you don't really know why you're doing things or where you're going. And you're really riding this horse of desire, and it's carrying you along. And other people see you and think, wow, that guy really seems to know what he's doing. But if we actually talk to the people who are playing this game, they'll actually say, I really don't know. I really think I need to buy a Bugatti. It's like, I don't know why. It just seems like that's the thing to do. And so that's when you're really being captured by these desires. And unfortunately for young people, especially young men these days, there's this real image that's being sold to them on social media and all the platforms that you're not really anything unless you've got some tremendous amount of wealth, unless you've got, access to all of these amazing material goods, that your life is not really, you're not really living. You're kind of like, you're just wasting your time here on earth. So see a lot of young guys actually get really caught up in that game. And, you see people playing, the crypto markets or, all of these different things, like trying to create this wealth. in reality, if they could really see what they were looking for, perhaps there was another way. There was another way that was actually much more in tune with who they truly are. Because you don't want to be living out someone else's story and someone else's dream. And so much of that wealth-based and consumerist-based life, it's not your dream. It's a dream that's been sold to you. And you have to worry that perhaps some of these dreams and some of these ideas are actually being sold purposely to you by, corporations and big businesses that want you to have those types of desires. And so I think that's always good to really always check in with yourself and really try and find out who you truly are and really try and focus on your own growth. And that's what the aspiration life is. That's really what we're trying to point people towards, that you do have a choice. You can try and play that game of success and desire and wealth, but there's another sort of game, which is about progress, and it's about your own internal progress, and it's about aspiration. It's about seeking for the best inside yourself and the highest inside yourself. And this takes us actually to one of the most beautiful things that Sri Chinmoy really helped clarify for me. And he talked about the aspiration life as being the life of self-giving. And so he had this great saying that self-giving is God becoming. And you may think, okay, what does that actually mean? And so at one point he clarified, he said, self-giving is self-discovering. And then self-discovering is God becoming. And so what that's telling us is that everything you're looking for in life, like the deepest possible sense of joy and happiness and meaning, actually comes not from taking from the world, but from giving to the world. You've been brought here to offer your very highest and best qualities to the world, like the divinity within you, we can call it, like that very best part of yourself. That's what you're here for. You're here not to keep that for yourself, but to offer it to the world. And it's through your offering of it that you actually discover what that is. If you just try and live your life for yourself, you'll never really truly see what you could have become, because you'll never have the opportunity to discover the deepest parts of yourself, because those parts only exist when we're giving ourselves fully to the world. So it's in our self-giving that we really discover who we are. And what we discover we are is the divine creative principle of the universe. We are all that is. But we won't find it unless we give ourselves to the game. So it's one of those things where we've been told that you have to take as much as you can from the world. But it's actually the complete opposite. It's like you have to give as much as you can to the world to really realize the highest.
Why is that coming through giving?
So I think human experience is relational. So I can't be generous and I can't be compassionate and I can't be loving unless there's something there for me to love. And when I really realize at the deepest depths that everyone else is me in a different form, here having their own unique experience, I see, of course, I want to love all of these people through their trials and their tribulations and their difficulties and their problems. They're simply divine consciousness here having a human experience. And so if I can give and if I can relate to the world from that place of love and self-giving, I will really realize that that's actually who I truly am at my deepest level. And I'll actually see it and feel it, because it's something that's experiential. It's not something theoretical. Like if I say that you truly are, your deepest depths is your truest nature is all giving, all love, all compassion, you can't know that until you offer it to people, until you offer it to the world around you.
But what if you take something? That is also relational, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, that's a limited way of playing the game, because if you're like, you can receive from other people, you can receive their love and their goodwill and their compassion and their generosity and all of those things. But if you're trying to take from them, then you're trying to pull from something. You're trying to pull from the world. You're trying to grasp hold of things. And what the Buddha said about suffering, it's not actually quite desire. We translate it to desire. But I think the best possible definition is clinging and grasping. And I think that's what we're trying to do. So often we're trying to grasp and pull things towards us from the world. And we're trying to cling on to the things that we have. Because I think those two words are more descriptive of what we're talking about. The desire life is the life of clinging to what you have and grasping for the things that you want. And so I think those ways of dealing with the world will always cause you suffering in the longest possible time, over the longest possible time. Whereas when you give to the world, you will always receive in response to that. So I'm not saying only give and never receive. It's like, as I said, it's relational. But your role is not to focus on the receiving. Your role is to focus on the giving, and then the receiving will come naturally to you. And
Yeah,
so,
you actually have to give in order to, you have to learn how to give in order to properly learn how to receive.
yeah,
You cannot properly receive if you don't know how to give as well.
yeah,
And if you are a cheerful giver, you can also be a cheerful receiver. So
yeah,
sometimes when people give you something, some people say, "Oh no, don't they refuse the gift," which is, to me, it's a real
yeah,
crime. Like if somebody wants to give you something, your act of receiving that with gratitude and with joy just increases the joy of the giver. So
exactly,
you're giving the giver an opportunity to give, and by giving, they expand their reality. And
yeah,
so receiving is definitely as important as is giving. I mean, I would focus on giving because, like you say, that's where you grow yourself.
yeah,
But when the universe gives you through other people, then also make sure to receive that properly and not to
yeah.
refuse the gifts.
Yeah, because that's the thing as well, like how you respond when you are offered something in some way ripples back into the universe. And so if you're trying to give me something and I take it unwillingly and with a sense of entitlement and without offering the proper response to the gift or the giving, then it's like anyone. If you buy your friend a really beautiful present that you've really thought long and hard about, and you give it to them for their birthday, and they really don't show any gratitude or care, or they just take it very, without any concern, it becomes less likely that people will give you such beautiful things, over a period of time. Whereas whenever you receive something from someone, if you take it as a real offering and you take it as a real opportunity to receive and practice that receiving, that's a great habit to get into. Because like I do know what you say, that there's some people who are so kind, but they only want to give and they never want to receive. And if you ever try and give something back to them, they'll really fight against it. And
Yeah.
it's you want to have both. Like it's like having two arms or two legs. Like with two legs you
Yeah.
can walk around, or two arms you can pick things up.
Giving and
See,
receiving are the upverse and reverse of the same coin in a sense.
yeah,
And I
exactly.
think also that, like you said about the giving of gifts, I think the universe is like that too. If you can receive the gifts of God, of the universe, with gratitude, then the universe is also more likely to say, hey, I like giving to this person. They
Yeah,
receive everything with gratitude. So let's give some more. Whereas if
yeah,
you refuse, you're kind of blocking that energy. And then the universe is like, okay, doesn't want my gifts? Fine, we'll not give anymore.
yeah. And so
So,
the one final thing I think that'd be nice to touch on a little bit is the idea of the intention and the way you go about things. So we've already talked about this a little bit in the past, and I touched on it as well about if your aim is just solely to accumulate wealth, you will start to see the world in terms of opportunities to either accumulate wealth or things that will stand in your way and block you from
and
achieving
then
that goal.
you will use people and love things.
Yeah, exactly. And so you'll have your relationships around the wrong way. But when we're looking at it from the positive side, and when we're trying to live, the best possible life we can live, and come from a place of the deepest part of our being and trying to manifest that in the world, then the important thing with your livelihood, because as we've said, that bank balance at the end of the week or at the end of the month has some material, it has a connection to the material world, and it allows you to do things or not do things. But I think what's really important is the intention with which you go about earning your living on a weekly basis. And so, if your only concern is the end goal, is the amount of dollars in your account, you're willing to cut corners, you're willing to rip people off, take advantage of people, do all of those things, which perhaps don't align with the values that you have for yourself in the world. And so I think we want to create a picture that is much more full and complete of what it looks like for us to live a good life. So I think what we really need for that is to listen to the voice of our conscience. So we need to check in regularly with our conscience and say, my intention this week was to go about things in the most divine way I possibly could. But where was I going wrong? Like which moments do I remember when I look back on the week that seem not to fit in with that vision of mine? And you'll always find one or two moments where you perhaps could have been a little bit more careful with your words, a little bit more self-giving with someone, a little bit more patient. And it's like taking those as opportunities to learn and grow. And so it's trying to create a picture of your life that it's not just that simplistic measurement that we focus on. It's like the holistic nature of our life. Like, how did I go about earning my money during that week? How did I go about treating my coworkers or treating the customers that come into my store? And how did I live in alignment with my values? And if you do that, that becomes then, I think then the money becomes a byproduct of doing the process well, because the process of living your life as well as you can on a weekly basis, if you're careful and patient and kind and present, you'll make really good impressions on people and you'll make really good decisions. And these are the things that will help you achieve outer success. If you're always present and aware and capable and bringing your full capacities to the moment, people will really enjoy having you around, and people will help you in ways that you perhaps can't even imagine. But if you're there only to get that paycheck, week on week, so you can get out of work and just ignore the whole thing, you're not really fully present there. You're probably better off doing something else, or at least changing your mindset somewhat. And so it's a real game. And that's the thing, like this game of life that we're playing is so complex and so beautiful. And it's going to call out every single part of you. It's going to call you to have to bring every single skill and ability and every quality, both seen and as yet unseen. Like, if you want to be successful in this game of life, it's going to require everything that you've got to be successful. And that's why it's the cosmic game. And that's why we're here to play that game and to really live it as fully as we can.
Exactly. And make some money on the side.
Yeah, exactly. If at the end of the day we end up with a nice bank balance, that's small. It's a small, price to pay to go along with that true success in the game of life. Yeah, because you don't want to get to the end of the game and have this huge bank balance that you can't spend, and then realize that you totally lost in the game, in the cosmic game you lost, and the financial game you totally crushed everyone.
You won.
But it's like, wow, there was perhaps time misspent here on Earth.
Yeah, exactly. Well, some people have to learn those lessons, and then they come back and do it again and hopefully do better.
Exactly.
You always get second chances.
Yeah.
Did you say everything you wanted to say about money?
I did. I think that was... Yeah. Do you have any questions? Any points that you...
Well, if there's any questions, I think we'll save them for a next episode. But this was fantastic and lovely. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and for having this wonderful conversation. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And
I was unsure what we would talk about today, because I knew you'd suggested that we have a conversation around money, and it was not immediately apparent to me what I knew about money more than anyone else. But it's always nice that when you actually bring the gaze of your spiritual insight, like you really bring the deeper part of your being to bear on any topic, things start to become revealed. They reveal themselves from bringing that, like not looking at it just purely from your mind and from the conditioning and the stories that you've heard and been told in your culture, but really trying to bring some of that deeper wisdom that exists within all of us. It's not my wisdom that I'm ever sharing. It's things that people before me have realized long ago. And I'm lucky that I've been exposed to some of these ideas, and some of them, sometimes these things make themselves visible to you when you pay the right type of attention to them.
And so pay attention, people.
Pay attention.
And it's always a lesson. Do the practice and learn how to be present in the moment. Fantastic, Vajit. Thank you so much. And to our dear listeners, I would say if you enjoy our podcast, please consider subscribing, leave us a comment or tell a friend, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same place.
Goodbye.
Bye.